Quick reminder before we get started on this episode. This podcast is based on my personal experiences and isn't medical advice. Whether you're celiac or going gluten-free for other reasons, the first 30 days gluten-free can feel overwhelming. You may be cleaning out the pantry, you might be reading labels like a detective, and maybe even wondering if you'll ever feel normal again. But here's the good news. Those first weeks can also be a time of big wins if you know what to expect. In today's episode, I'll share the changes you might notice in your body, the challenges that trip people up, and practical tips to not just survive, but to thrive in your first month gluten-free. And stick with me to the end because I'll share the one thing that made the biggest difference for me in those early days. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Gluten-Free Engineer podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Saunders. In 2011, I was diagnosed with celiac disease, a moment that changed everything. But I was determined not to let it hold me back. With my 2 engineering degrees, I set out to reverse engineer the gluten-free lifestyle, breaking down recipes, safety tips, travel hacks, and everything in between to rebuild a life I love. Whether you have celiac disease, gluten intolerance, or simply choose to live gluten-free, this podcast is for you. Join me each week as we simplify the gluten-free lifestyle, make it fun, and prove that you don't have to miss out on anything. Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about the first 30 days of going gluten-free, whether you are newly diagnosed celiac or you are making that diet change for other reasons, other health reasons in your life. And what you might find especially if you're going gluten-free cold turkey, which is not what I did, but I have witnessed and seen other people do that. I didn't realize I had to go gluten-free cold turkey because at first I accidentally went gluten-free, didn't realize I had celiac. But when you go cold turkey gluten-free, you're going to be in the detox and overwhelm phase. This is can be the hardest week. And if you get through this week, you're going to start making momentum. You may be cleaning out gluten from your pantry, from your fridge, from your routine. You may be thinking about, how do I have breakfast without gluten? How do I have lunch without gluten? What do I do in this situation? So it's a really good idea to try to think through those situations, not to overwhelm yourself, but from a opportunity standpoint. What are my opportunities for change? How can I make this change easier? So as long as you're focusing on making it easier, it's going to be a bit plainly easier on you mentally. Whenever we see something that is such a significant change as a major roadblock in our lives, no matter what it is, it can really make it more difficult to go through that change that's happening, whether it's a new health diagnosis or some other situation in your life that is a major change for you. So always have a very positive attitude when it comes to what are your next steps with being gluten-free and how can you make this easier. You might also in that first week get gluten withdrawal symptoms. That can include headaches, fatigue, and mood swings. You may feel worse before you feel better, especially if you're celiac, and that's completely normal. Our body's gut biome, I'm learning a lot lately by reading some doctors' books, really want to try to keep themselves alive. It's just like a normal organism out there. They want to keep themselves alive, so they crave the things that are feeding them. So there are certain bacteria that live off of gluten and like a gluten type of carbs the best. So those bacteria that is in your stomach, the digestive bacteria, is going to get kind of angry at you that you're starting to starve it. Now, in the end, this is a good thing because that's not the bacteria you really want in your stomach anyway. We want to have, because that's just not compatible with you. So you just know that you might have some, you might kind of feel flu-ish that first week. I'm sure you probably heard of the keto diet and having keto flu. That's part of this. You kind of may feel like a keto type of flu. You might also get very overwhelmed and you might have fear of eating the wrong thing. If you're celiac, you might have grief over favorite foods, no matter the reason that you're going gluten-free. And this is really normal. And we actually have an episode about the grief that comes behind going gluten-free, especially when it's a medical diagnosis and not, a choice that you've made for your own, for health reasons. So just know that there's going to be potentially some emotional overwhelm. Have a trusted best friend or your spouse or partner who is there and ready to support you during those times. It's really going to make it a lot more helpful if you find somebody, even if they're not in your immediate family. Maybe your immediate family doesn't quite get it or understand, but I bet you can find a friend out there that can understand. And you're always welcome to join our free Facebook group. Just look for the Gluten-Free Engineer to find support in there too. And then in week 2, you'll kind of get more into the learning mode, likely. You will start getting better at reading the labels. You will be able to find hidden gluten a bit better. You might find it in sauces, dressings, and seasonings. We have some episodes on where you can find hidden gluten and some places to watch out for. So if you're new to being gluten-free, definitely check that one out. You're going to want to be discovering naturally gluten-free foods that feel safe. That is going to really help you make this transition. So go for single ingredient foods. That's the easiest way to be gluten-free is single ingredient foods like an apple, a banana, an orange, salad, maybe the cheese that's on top of it. Now, much of those cheeses are not single ingredients. So I'm going to give you a little exception there just for some taste if you can tolerate cheese. But it's pretty rare that cheese has gluten in it. Just avoid like blue cheese and stuff like that because the mold is grown on wheat sometimes there. But you want to add some things maybe to your salad that are single ingredients. Maybe it's carrots, maybe it's celery, maybe it's bell peppers. And then when you want to add something else into it, I'm kind of squirreling here on the salad because I kind of got stuck on salads lately when I'm eating. Make sure you find a gluten-free dressing so that you are satisfied. I know a lot of people can't eat salads without dressing. I am one of those weird ones who can. It doesn't really bother me that much, although I do enjoy a very good ranch or some sort of vinaigrette. But Tessemae brand and Primal Kitchen are great at being gluten-free. So look for those if you are having a hard time determining whether the salad dressing has gluten in it or not. Okay, back to the single ingredient foods. I a little bit went on a tangent there, but I want to make sure we have enjoyable food too. So other single ingredient foods would be like potatoes. We could be putting in the protein of your choice, provided it is not modified, it is not, marinated. There's nothing done to it. It's just literally a chunk of chicken or beef or pork, and nothing else has been done to it. So those single ingredient foods can really make it super simple for you at first, until you might want to add in a little bit of somewhat processed foods. I do like to talk on the podcast about, minimally processed is so much better for us in the long run and in general. And it makes it a lot easier when you're gluten-free to find gluten-free items when you get minimally processed things that are like 5 ingredients or less. And I find my tummy feels better that way too. And then I want you to find your first go-to meals that make your life easier. What would you love to have for breakfast? For example, what could you eat every day for breakfast so you don't have to decide how to eat a gluten-free breakfast? And then maybe you rotate it to next week. It depends on who you are. But me personally, I can eat the same thing for breakfast every day. I just really don't even like breakfast. And it just is just fuel for my day. So I eat a couple things of chicken or pork sausage that I know are gluten-free, and that's it. I just eat 2 pieces of sausage and some water, and I'm done. That's my breakfast. But I know a lot of people like to have a more fulfilling and bigger breakfast. So what is that for you? What would you love to eat every day? Is it eggs and maybe a gluten-free toast with something simple like butter or jelly on it? Is it avocado toast? What is it that it is for you? And make sure it's, obviously certified gluten-free if you're going to go that route. And then repeat the same thing for lunch. Maybe you have a simple rotation for lunch. We want to make the decision if it takes small here. We want to minimize it as much as possible, especially those first weeks going gluten-free. I would recommend not getting too adventurous, just so you can keep things simple. Obviously, we want to still have fun and reward ourselves, but still keep it pretty simple so that you are feeling better and you're not too having to decide too many things too much. And then in week 3, you might see some small wins. You're going to see your digestion probably improve. You're going to probably see bloating decreases. You may even have seen that in week 2 as you get gluten out of your body, because when it's not supposed to be in our bodies, when our bodies are not tolerant to it, it can cause all kinds of weird stuff, including bloating and just feeling meh, just very meh. More energy you'll probably find that you have. That brain fog is probably going to start to lift. I remember when I first went gluten-free accidentally, it was like the world was in high definition again. I don't know how else to describe it other than I didn't feel like I had like this fog around my peripheral vision. In literally my vision itself, it seemed like, as well as my mental vision, if that makes sense. So you're going to see some of that brain fog getting lifted, and you're going to start feeling better there. You're going to probably start getting some confidence as you navigate restaurants or grocery stores. And I also want to say here too, you're going to gain that confidence, but also expect you might mess up later. Just don't beat yourself up from it. And, you know, figure out what went wrong. What could you do better to make it so you don't accidentally get gluten or something like that. So I want your confidence to grow. I want you to feel good about your choices and how you're making your choices, but don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. I've made mistakes so many times. It's not even funny. Obviously, I try to learn from it and not repeat that same mistake again, but I also don't want you to get down on yourself because this is a hard process. If you make a mistake, let's say, how do we fix this? Where do we go with this next? What could I do better? Do I need to prepare something? Should I have brought a snack? What are all these things? We talk about this in one of our episodes. How can we help whenever we made a mistake and learn from it? And then in week 4, you're going to get even more confidence and more into a routine. I feel like about 4 weeks is when, oh my goodness, I just felt so good. And I felt like I had this down. I felt like I was doing so well. You're going to get more into a rhythm. You're going to find your favorite products, your meals and snacks that you love. This is going to be a wonderful week for you. I feel like for most people, week 4 is really good. You're going to also be able to see how much better you feel. And that's going to be a motivation to keep going. Some people ask me, how do you not even want that donut or that, croissant or whatever it might be, or that bread at that restaurant? And I just tell them, I said, it makes me feel so bad that I just don't even want it. So once you've detoxed enough, you're going to probably get to a point eventually where, and it may not be at 4 weeks, it could be longer. It kind of depends upon your upbringing, who you are, and how you deal with these things and how your body reacts too. But you will eventually get to a point where it's like, I feel terrible if I even have a little tiny crumb or a little tiny bite. It's just not even worth it. And so you won't even want to do it. So you're going to really get into a great routine and rhythm, and you're going to really feel how much better that you feel afterwards. And that's going to help you keep going. And I want you to start focusing on thriving at this point and not just surviving, because the first few weeks, you're going to more feel like you're in survival mode. How do I do this? How do I get this right? But then as you get in the routine and you get more confidence, you're going to be more on thriving. So how can you thrive more here? And then, so I want to give you a little bit of tips for the first 30 days on how to thrive throughout it. I want you to plan simple meals to avoid overwhelm, like we talked about earlier. I want you to always carry safe snacks to prevent getting stuck hungry somewhere where you can't find something safe to eat. I want you to also join a support group or an online community like our Facebook group, The Gluten-Free Engineer, for encouragement. And I want you to give yourself grace. Mistakes can happen, and they probably will. And each one is there to teach you something. How can you fix it? How can you avoid this in the future? And if you're just starting your gluten-free journey, you don't have to do it alone. Every few weeks, I send out a gluten-free newsletter with recipes, product finds, and encouragements to make the transition easier. Go ahead and sign up at theglutenfreeengineer.com so you always have support and new ideas in your inbox. And then here's the one thing that made the biggest difference for me in the first 30 days was keeping a list of safe go-to meals and snacks, whether it was on my fridge or on my counter. In those early weeks, decision fatigue is definitely real. So having a list I could glance at, took away the stress of what do I eat and made everything more manageable, because we don't want you stuck worried about what to eat next. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Gluten-Free Engineer. If you found value in this story, please share it with someone who might need encouragement on their own gluten-free journey. For more tips, recipes, resources, and even links to my YouTube channel, head on over to theglutenfreeengineer.com. It's your one-stop hub to make gluten-free living simple, fun, and full of flavor. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on an episode. And we will see you next week. The Gluten-Free Engineer podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. I share my personal experiences and stories about living with celiac disease and navigating a gluten-free lifestyle. This podcast does not provide medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional for medical questions, concerns, or advice specific to your health. This episode is brought to you by Find Me Gluten-Free, your go-to app for discovering safe, gluten-free dining options wherever you go. Whether you're traveling or just looking for a new local spot, this app helps you find restaurants with gluten-free options, read reviews from other gluten-free diners, and avoid risky places, just like our family has used this app for many years. And here's the best part. Just for the Gluten-Free Engineer listeners, you can get an exclusive $5 discount on a premium membership. Head on over to theglutenfreeengineer.com/findmeglutenfree or check the show notes to grab your deal and make dining out stress-free, because eating out gluten-free shouldn't be a guessing game.